Hey there, Algae Talkers. Well, it's been a tough few weeks, but an interesting one for microbiology. Who knew that microbiology could be so popular? But thanks to coronavirus, or COVID-19, we are starting to see that people are interested in our micro worlds and microbiology and microalgae, and it's allowing people to be able to see that there's a whole other side, a whole world under their microscope. And hopefully this will be a time that people understand that there's more to nature than meets the eye. And just as a reminder, not that I think I have to if you're listening to this podcast, but we have found out, it seems that zinc is supposed to be able to help your immune system. So don't forget to eat your algae, micro, macro, seaweeds, kelps, any kind of algae you can get your hands on. I'm certainly doing that. On this episode, we're going to discuss design with Samuel Iliffe. Samuel is a trained designer who is now in residence at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, exhibiting the Algae Platform, which is brought to you by Atelier Luma. This exhibit is to try to show how algae can be a part of our lives, and showing different designs and projects that are being worked on around the world for this algae platform. I don't want to give everything away because it's very interesting designs and projects that Algae Platform is working on. So without further ado, here's Samuel Iliffe on the Algae Platform.
My name's Samuel Iliffe, and I'm the designer in residence at the Royal Academy of Arts, working on a project called Algae Platform London, which is looking at algae in London.
How to incorporate it into
that could mean.
which is a lot. And so the Algae Platform is part of an exhibition that was Atelier Luma?
Atelier Luma.
Atelier Luma.
So Atelier Luma is a design studio based in France. The studio is based in Arles, which is a town in the Camargue. And in the beginning of the studio, they had designers and researchers going out into the Camargue region and trying to understand more about the natural resources and other things like human and capital resources in the area. The idea is to try and use design as a way to reinvigorate the area. And one of the things they found was algae. For example, there are salt marshes in the Camargue. The salt marshes are pink, and they're pink because of this algae that grow in there. That's one of the things that I found is really interesting. I didn't know about extremophiles before. And so,
what are extremophiles?
So extremophiles are basically anything that can grow in extreme environments.
Right. And algae is definitely one of those.
Yeah. So for this example, it grows in an incredibly high salinity environment. And that can be interesting for lots of reasons. If you're growing it in a farm, for example, whenever you grow things in farms, one of the problems you can face is contamination and other things taking over the crop. If you grow extremophiles, that's a way of preventing that because basically not many things can grow.
Which is really cool, like the whole concept that they've come up with to use design or these exhibits to really show that algae could be a resource, it's environmentally friendly, but that also we can capitalize on this resource.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're trying to purely looking for like economic value. They are looking for just value in all senses of the word.
Right, absolutely. But the reason that I say that is for it to be adopted, for algae to be really adopted in the world that we live in. The world that we live in is capitalistic and runs on the economy. And that this is sort of the future, is the way to introduce it to people is through more of a understanding how is it going to fit into my life. And can you tell me about some of the designs that are being done, some of the cool ones? Or,
So there's kind of two areas. The first one has been using it as a material or kind of pigment. So it's kind of difficult because we're in the room, but it's radio. But there are several samples around us. One of them is a veneer on a table, which is a mixture of algae and potato starch.
The actual table itself?
Yeah. So the tabletop. But it's a veneer, so it's like a normal wooden table underneath. And then to the side we have, well, actually there's 3 cultivations of different types of microalgae growing here. And they're different colors. This was one of the things that they noticed, and the first main area that Atelier Luma looked at was using these different types of algae as pigment. So on another wall, we have bits of 3D filaments which have been colored with algae. And then there are some different objects that have been made from the 3D filament.
Yeah, you can see there's a hookah up there, which is actually like a cool kind of way to introduce it.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool, like, jars and things like that. Things that you would see in somebody's house as art.
Yeah. And
they're like pretty to look at.
One more, which is the wall behind me, is painted with algae. So they're trying lots of things.
And pigments are a major point of it. Like, even now, there's all types of different companies, and pigments are being used, you're showing it in paints and being able to use that color. It also can be used because it's a natural resource to actually be used as food coloring as well.
Yeah.
Instead of using, yellow dye number 5, you can actually have this algae, that's the color, and it's more, you can actually get nutritional value out of it even.
Yeah. So earlier this week, one of the people that I was meeting with has been showing me, just from the same species of algae, depending on the conditions you put it in, you can get lots of different colors out.
Yeah. Even the one that we could grow, I work with algae, and I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
And so we have Metacoccus pluvialis that when you stress it, it creates astaxanthin, which is red, which gives flamingos their color and shrimps their color. Well, really, it's the shrimps and then the flamingos eat it. Right. But it gives them that beautiful pink that people like seeing. If you get like a very
that's also like a pharmaceutical?
It can be used for cosmetics, but for instance, putting that pigment of a certain algae in clothing can actually help somebody that maybe has a skin condition. And things like that could actually be integrated into clothing.
It's also kind of funny because a few of the designers that have started this didn't have a background in biology or chemistry per se, but it's kind of obvious when you look at these different types of algae, you're like, oh wow, it's an amazing color. Maybe I should try and use it as a pigment or something. But we're at the point now where some of the stuff that we've done is now becoming interesting to some scientists that I've been talking to. The filaments that are next to us were of some interest to some people that I'd met at the University of Greenwich, because they basically hadn't imagined that the pigment would last as long as it had, particularly some of the more kind of red and orange ones.
Yeah, you'd think they'd fade over time.
So actually the painted wall behind me was kind of a redder color, but it's gone more yellow, whereas this pigment is a couple of years old. I kind of find that interesting, that you can go down a very designerly route and kind of stumble upon something which might create new kind of scientific knowledge.
Through design to science. And vice versa, which is very important within the algae industry, is having the academics and having the industry work together and be able to understand how to use it, and having different perspectives, having a diverse perspective, very much like algae is diverse, and having different people look at it from a different angle and understanding that. And it can give a different eye to scientists that are usually just in the lab screaming at the algae like, why are you working? And you're just like, well, maybe we want it not to work like that. Maybe we can use it in a different way.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things I was going to say. I think designers are good at figuring out other opportunities that maybe scientists don't think is particularly valuable. Because obviously, with algae, it's been, I don't know, maybe has it been 50 years that people have been trying to make?
Since microalgae, it's about 150 for like macro and seaweeds, and being able to use that. They've been used as resources in Scotland to,
But it's like since the Carter administration that they've been trying to...
Yeah, exactly. Since the Carter administration, they've been trying to make it into an algae biofuel as a resource. And only since we've had electron microscopes can we really see what's going on. And even now with CRISPR technology and being able to understand the DNA sequencing of it, it gives us even more of an area to look into potentially in the future. So this is like you're saying, it's only 50 years, and that may sound like a long time. Baby Yoda was 50 or 80. He's still a baby. So I mean, it is a baby industry that is just starting out, and the potential is amazing. And that's why it's very good that the Algae Platform exhibit exists. And it exists around the world. Can you tell me like the different pilot projects that exist around the world, where they are?
So it's mainly based in France, but obviously there's the London bit that they're doing now. They went to Cairo at one point, and that's actually where a lot of the objects that are behind me, like the hookah.
Like the hookah, yes, that would make sense.
They did a kind of workshop with, I think, designers in Cairo, and got them to try and design objects with this 3D printing filament. They're very interested in collaboration and...
which is very important in algae and using it to be able to design. I mean, for instance, you're in London. You know, you're going to be looking at algae, using it in a different way, in a very urban sort of way. Cairo is definitely very urban, but in almost an entirely different way. The climate is different. The cultures are different. You know, I don't know if somebody in London would think about a hookah. Maybe nowadays they would. But you can see that the cultural differences are also very important to design in general. I mean, I'm sure, you've studied design, so you must understand that cultural, influence on design. You go around and you see architecture. The architecture of London is completely different from other places around the world.
So it's nice that Atelier Luma is able to kind of have a far reach.
Do you talk to any of these other designers? Do you guys ever talk on Skype or?
I mean, I've only been working at Atelier Luma for 3 months, so what I've been doing has been concentrating on kind of my project, but
tell me about that project.
Sure. So it's a project in 2 halves, really. The first half has been kind of design research and finding all of the different actors in London who are working with algae. So by actors, I mean research institutions, technology companies, design studios, regulatory bodies, which might have some legislation which affects algae in some way. And then also looking at different sites in London where I can actually find algae. And the culmination of that bit has been a digital and a physical map. So there's the physical map right here. And a digital map which people can look at online, and it basically shows everything that's going on in London.
It's very cool. It's almost like you're like a detective of finding where can I use algae, who can I talk to. I'm waiting to see strings being attached.
It's got slight kind of serial killer vibes. Stalker vibe. So that's been the first half.
It reminds me of the meme from Sunny in Philadelphia.
Exactly. I know.
But I mean, you actually have, compared to Charlie from Sunny in Philadelphia, you actually have an idea of what's actually going on, and there is a reality to this. There's even your study started 3 months ago. For years already before, people have been trying to find different ways to use algae. And I think what's actually one of the things that's very cool about this exhibit and what you're doing with the Algae Platform is connecting all these people. They don't really actually have a connection to, they don't sometimes talk to each other. They don't think to talk to each other. And when sort of somebody has the God's eye view and sort of understands, well, this person could really help with talking to this person. And
exactly. And also, I should mention that Atelier Luma is having they have a festival called Luma Days in Arles, and part of that they have the Algae Platform Summit. So this is kind of what some of my work has been towards, trying to find people that could possibly come to this event. And it's just a kind of festival or meetup for everyone interested in algae to come and be able to be in one place.
And when is this happening?
From the 27th to the 31st of May. This is looking at science, academia, design, historians, trying to get everyone together.
Absolutely.
And look from a completely kind of transdisciplinary approach.
Yeah, transdisciplinary, or like a whole understanding of it, which is really cool. I mean, that's very much in the spirit of what I'm trying to do with this podcast. Is make it into an area where everybody can sort of talk to each other and hear each other's stories. I mean, I'm sure there's people that work in labs in South America and India and the rest of the world, anywhere in the world really, that people are studying algae and are in the labs. Yeah. And they're like, holy crap, I can't believe that they're doing that. And it gives them excitement to really understand that there are people out there. I mean, sometimes when you're in a lab by yourself and you're trying to take away this little cell from that little cell, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, now I understand. This is a bigger picture of what really could be done in the future.
Yeah, I think it's funny in design, there's this thing where most ideas that you have, you go through a process where, I don't know, you research it, Google it or something, and you realize, oh, someone's done that 20 years ago. And I've, as with most with algae, I've had this as well. And it's just, it's been amazing to see people all around the world that have been working for 20, 30 years on different projects.
There's a large amount of data to go through for designers that maybe haven't thought about algae as using it for pigment or really just anything, or using it as a chandelier or to take CO2 out of areas in a building, and being able to use it in that way. There's a lot of data for designers to be able to use. So you have a design background.
Well, my background is actually in engineering.
Okay.
And then, so I did an undergraduate in engineering, which had a industry year where I was working in material science. So I was synthesizing graphene. After that, I worked for another company called Sugru, which is a moldable putty, another kind of material business. And then after that, I did this course called Innovation Design Engineering. And so it's a mix of design and engineering.
So this isn't your first rodeo with science. You've tackled this before.
Kind of.
To understand, how to integrate science into your designs that you've done in the past. But this is the first time you're using algae as a material for design?
First time looking at algae, really.
Can you just tell me about that experience, what you've kind of learned and like...
I guess my experience was, to begin with, it's like this flood of information, and you'll kind of feel like you're in open water and not really sure like what to grasp onto. And then you just kind of have to keep going through stuff, and finally you start seeing things that you recognize. You have to keep thinking like, what is the importance of this? I can very easily just keep reading papers ad infinitum and be interested in things that people are doing. But it always has to be grounded in like, what interest is there for me and for the project.
What has been the most surprising thing that you found about algae? Because I'll tell you mine, like when I started learning about algae, the rate of growth from the petri dish to putting it into a reactor and getting a biomass out of it, it grows within a month or two compared to like, let's say a fig tree or an olive tree that takes an incredibly long time to harvest.
And from that also the potential carbon sequestering ability, it's something like 100 times greater as plants. I mean, that's amazing. The kind of valuable chemicals like the xanthins. I saw another one, fucoxanthin, which is
xenothanthin, fucoxanthin, which is good for fatty livers.
The whole omega-3 thing, I think that's a really interesting kind of narrative. Like, we get omega-3 oil from fish, but fish don't actually make omega-3 oil. It just accumulates in their body. It comes from algae. It just makes a lot more sense for us to be getting the omega-3 straight from algae rather than fish. Some of the historical perspective I find interesting as well. So particularly in London or in the UK, in the Victorian era, there was a lot of interest in collecting everything. collecting animals, plants, and everything like that. Apart from algae, so it was usually men who were going out to collect specimens of animals and plants. But it turns out that it was predominantly women who were going out to collect algae samples. Mm-hmm. And these people were called the algae hunters.
Yeah.
And so the first kind of research and data that we have has all been done by women, most mm-hmm. of whom do not have a proper background because they weren't allowed to,
to go to universities
and even Queen Victoria had a seaweed collection.
Really? I didn't know that. Oh, that's an interesting side story right there. Yeah. But it reminds me of Amelia Griffith and Alan Hutchins and these women that didn't really have that kind of a background.
Yeah.
Had the tutelage of men like Dawson Turner or W.H. Harvey, but they kind of just, for lack of a better word, kind of sat at home and collected all these things.
Yeah.
But it was the majority of the people that you think about who's collecting algae. It's the women that were out there by the seashore,
Yeah.
Like Anne Manning, the seashell by the seashore. It's not that, but you could see that during that time there was a lot of interest for women. It was one of the areas that was open to them because everybody thought, algae, all this little muck and little plants that keep falling on the shore. Who cares about it? And women were like, well, what if we put it out on glass and The Algae Platform, you tell me how long is it going on for? And it's been since November 29 and I think until February?
So the London part of it is until the 6th of February, where I'm giving a talk about the work that I did.
And so you kind of put this together yourself, or you had some collaboration? Like, can you write your signature and go, Samuel, this is mine?
Some parts of it, yeah. I mean, other things around us are work that's been done previously by the rest of the people. My project manager, Joanna Wegler, Henri Eckwall, Daniel Bell. These are people that have been working for a lot longer on the project. I've simply been here for the London part of it.
And you put together this exhibit. You put,
so they put it together, but I've been kind of adding to it. So that there's a huge map of London, and I've been adding to this map of London. And then we also have some material samples. I've got some of my urine. Trying to grow algae in urine, not just Howard Hughesing it in here.
You do have the glass bottles to Howard Hughes it. You could just see there's no door, so it'd be a little bit hard to lock in. But this is the exhibit, or there's more?
So this is just the part of the exhibit for Atelier Luma, but this is also part of a bigger exhibit called Eco-Visionaries, which is about designers who are commenting on the climate crisis, basically looking at what they're designing, what they're doing.
So from hearing like you had this exhibit when you have all the things that you've talked about, kind of now that you're doing this and you're doing this for a bit, and how would you, let's say if someone gave you, here's $100 million, I want you to integrate algae into London, what would be some of the ideas that you have?
Okay, well, I think...
Maybe some you don't want to give away. But.
Yeah, I mean, I think London from a resource perspective is interesting. So I'm trying to think, like, what's London like now, and what is it going to be like in 10 years or 20 years? So the population is going to increase, and pollution is meant to be going down, but with more people there comes more shit and piss. Yeah. So actually you have more of this resource, and if you think of it as a resource, urine, for example, is really high in nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, which are
algae loves that.
Yeah. So what I've been looking at is kind of waste remediation and trying to valorize our waste in that way.
So you could see it being like, let's say, large, facilities that are treating the waste from London and growing algae, and then not only that, afterwards using that algae as a resource to make, lines or hookahs or,
In terms of what you can make from it, obviously, it's always about the economic viability for most people. It's like, what's the most valuable product in here. Well, if it's fucoxanthin, then how do we kind of grow or modify the algae so that it's producing as much fucoxanthin as possible? Or how can we, modify algae to produce things that we want? But it might also be, how can we use algae to take things that we want out of the water? Where it's getting more and more difficult to filter wastewater. As a society, we're taking more and more drugs. I did hear about eels in the Thames getting high on cocaine.
Interesting.
That's
It could be more. Eels could be more aggressive than they actually are. But I like the concept that from lack of a better word, the piss and shit from London that's flowing creates large algae blooms, and people only see that. They only see the harmful algal blooms.
Yeah.
And as a design point, you can look at it from a different perspective and go, why is that happening? How can we incorporate that? How can we use it for our benefit and to make the environment cleaner in the end?
There's the kind of economic value from the biomass, but I think also when you're a designer, you can go a step away from that and think more about other values of biomass. So things like carbon sequestering, it might not be the most economically viable way of growing algae. So for example, I went to some algae farms and I realized that they're using bicarbonate rather than taking CO2 from the atmosphere, which kind of makes you feel a little bit like, shit, I thought, I thought what was good about this was that it could do that. But from an economic perspective, it makes more sense to use bicarbonate because you can grow it faster.
It reminds me actually of a design because, even at where I work, we have big tanks of CO2. Yeah. They bring it in, they hook it up. Yeah. It's not as much as we would like it to be as much, like trees that just grab CO2. Yeah. Algal blooms are doing that for us. The ocean itself is doing that and producing the larger amount of oxygen that we actually breathe. Yeah. But there's a concept to actually have a algal facility connected to a power plant or other facilities that are creating CO2 and then capturing that CO2 and pushing it right into the algae and using it once again at a filtration system. I mean, algae, one of the main reasons that they exist, or actually a twist in that, is we actually exist for them. Yeah, because plants needed animals to be here for us to create all this CO2 and all these nutrients that we pump out. And they're here to sort of live off of us and us off of them. And it's a very symbiotic relationship. And the more we get back to that and the more we integrate that into our lives, our cities, I think it's a better future for us.
Yeah, and like you saying that, I think that is another one of the most interesting things that I've realized. The fact that our planet would not be the same without algae. Yeah. And also that most oil in the ground is fossilized algae, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's not the dinosaurs. Yeah. No. Yeah. So I mean, in a way, I find it to be a weird angle that because marine plants, mainly algae, it's old ancient algae that we're pumping out of the ground, we already are using algae as a biofuel. I mean, not the way that we really want to do it in the future, but it's already happening. I see a sign here that says, please bring in samples of water to test for algae.
Yeah, so I've been trying to do...
I think you should make, maybe a better, because you're a designer, make
a better sign.
Make a better sign or something like that. Or, I don't know, it has that kind of cool, we're a rock band, take a number sort of a concept. Can you tell me what's behind that?
What I'm trying to do is take samples of water around London and test which species of algae are growing in them to get an idea of the species that grow in London. So actually, I made a map of all of the freshwater algae that grow just in the British Isles, and I'm trying to see like which of these grow in in London.
Right, and you were telling me that someone actually met Susie from Slime Watch at the conference in Plymouth, is using this, and her perspective is, everybody thinks that cities are kind of these dead areas, there's nothing living here.
Yeah.
But there really is under the city, this, not just algae, there's a whole ecosystem under our feet and in the air and surrounding us. We don't think about it. You get on the underground and you just walk down, but through that area is
the rats.
The rats, they're part of the ecosystem as much as we don't want them. But
I think there's another theory about everything is everywhere with microorganisms.
So how do you get people to bring you samples? This one poster's here. It's in the area that you want them to bring it in. So is the concept is when people see the exhibit, they'll go outside and bring the banks here?
Yeah, hopefully that. I mean, I'm also going to be doing it myself. So taking water samples, and then I'm going to hopefully go to this place called the Angela Marmot Centre in the Natural History Museum, which has a kind of identification service for UK biodiversity. A lot of this work requires specific equipment and know-how, and it takes time to figure out where you can do this stuff. And
especially with algae, there's over 200,000 species. I don't know how much live in London. But to be able to identify them all takes, really a scientific background. It does take that sort of knowledge to be able to just under the microscope, that's that over there. Can you tell me what kind of species of algae have you seen around London?
So pretty much all veils is the only one I've seen, and I've seen a lot of it. So it's this kind of green filamentous algae. It grows pretty much everywhere.
Really?
It's I found some in the Thames, so on the steps of stairs leading down to the Thames. I went on a walk through the Lee Valley and the River Lee, and I found some. I think basically there's lots of houseboats on that river and it gets stuck in the motors, so people just throw it out in clumps.
Wow. You were like, no, give that to me.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah.
So what's the future for the Algae Platform? Your work, is your work going to stop? Do you want to continue?
I want to continue. My future plans are I would really like to keep working with algae because I feel like I've done research and I'm starting to think of ideas. I want to be able to put some of those ideas in practice.
So after this, you're a free agent, let's say.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody that's listening, definitely contact you. And I mean, it's very exciting within. I'm sure you are starting. I mean, I kind of realized also that this is really a booming or blooming. I've heard that before. I have to stop using it. Yeah, it's a blooming industry in a field of design, a field of just a resource to be able to use. Yeah. That's only been around for 50 or so years, but I would only say past 20 or 30, we really start to actually understand it, and maybe only since the algae biofuel collapse that really all these scientists that were concentrating on biofuel spread out to all these areas, and we're really seeing an increase of all these industries and people that are interested in using it for cosmetics, for plastics and things like that.
Yeah, so from what I understand, 2012 was the kind of either the bust or the bust of algae biofuels, and most of these companies have now moved to nutraceuticals or pharmaceuticals. So there's renewed interest there, and I actually there's a cosmetic store called Heckles in London, which uses seaweed in all of its products. So there's cosmetics, maybe a kind of boom is going to happen there. I think in general people are more concerned about climate crisis now, and there's lots of potentials with algae in that area. So I think that there is and there will be more of a renewed interest in algae.
Yeah, people are going to start seeing it, in the Caribbean. It's been washing up and ruining people's vacations. It's starting to be more on the map, maybe not in the right way, but people are going to start to realize that algae is the canary in the coal mine for climate change. It's, it's going to show us. Yeah. You can't keep just pumping waste into the ocean and expect not to have it to have affected on that area.
That's, to me, an area where it doesn't make economic sense at first, but if you're able to market it and design it the right way, then there's a company I was telling you about before called either Not PLA or Not PLA. And they...
NOTPLA,
and they've made a kind of plasticky type packaging material, which is really interesting because it biodegrades faster than orange peel. I looked at one of the tests that they did in a wormery and it took like 9 days or something. Some of those seaweeds that they're getting it from grow like 2 meters a day. Which is crazy.
Which is crazy, But it's really cool. It's being used in the London Marathon as a pouch for water, and you could just put it in your mouth, and it was kind of like biting into a tomato. And you just, which is good for someone that's running. You don't have to have a water bottle and spritz it all over you. Maybe you can just hit your head with the little package. Have you seen these packages? Have you used them? Because now they're using
so I went to
ketchups as well, or condiments.
I went to their factory to look at how they make everything, which was quite amazing. And so that's another area where it's really also about the design, because they've realized that there's an area where you don't need a water bottle because your liquid that you're holding is being used so quickly in the scenario of the London Marathon that it just doesn't need to be. A fast food chain.
Did you try any of them? Or what was the experience like?
Well, it was quite funny. We were filming a video of the factory with them, and the last shot was me and one of the co-founders, Rodrigo, trying these, because they've worked with a whiskey company, Glenfiddich. And so we were trying shots of Glenfiddich in the seaweed. And we did like 3 or 4 takes. Probably didn't need to do that many, but
but what was it like when it was in your mouth? Did it feel like it was it strange? Was it?
It was a little bit strange. But
after the 3rd or 4th, it's let's just start popping these like another
it was like it was weird. You had to kind of put it in the side of your mouth and then break it open and it bursts open. But the actual the seaweed, it doesn't taste of anything.
So you didn't take it out like, let's say you put like a piece of plastic, you want to take it out of your mouth. You swallowed it whole.
It's edible.
Yeah, right. That's that's really what's the cool thing about it.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully we'll see more of this in the future. It's only the past 2 years that they've been using this technology. It's very funny because it's one of the first things I saw introduced to these little Glenlivet shots for little. They called them Tide Pods. So a lot of the late night. Stephen Colbert and these others in America were making fun. I'm not making
Is anyone taking a whiskey pod today? One? I was wondering why the audience is so hot. But they're like detergent pods, but they're filled with alcohol. Check it out. This is real. It's a real thing. That's great, because until now, if you wanted to get drunk off of plastic, you just had to swallow a lot of Listerine strips. Right. Which I've done.
It's really good marketing. Yeah, it was really smart. But the only thing that I saw was they didn't really talk about the seaweed angle about it, and that it's made fun of it as like a Tide Pod sort of a thing, and that kind of an angle, but didn't really talk about the seaweed. But of course, they got to make jokes out of it, so it's understandable. But at least people see it in that direction, and it's good to see that London is on the cutting edge of making that happen.
It's nice.
Very cool. So if anybody wanted to contact you once you're a free agent or want to get more information about the Algae Platform, can you tell me first, how do you find out about the Algae Platform, or where it's going to be going in the future? Is it going to be sitting here?
So maybe we can put some links up, but my email is samuel.iliffe@network.rca.ac.uk. We'll put it up.
We'll put it up,
and there's a kind of prototype map that I have online now, which we can put up as well. That's for people they can email me and tell me about other places in London or other things I can check out. And then there's the Atelier Luma website, and then on the Royal Academy's website, there's also information there.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Samuel. And hopefully maybe we'll see you in the future. And be the head of design for some large algae company. You know? Who knows?
Be nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
Thanks.
Well, I hope from this conversation with Samuel you understand how important design is, and we have even more interviews with other people that deal with design and algae. So the event that Samuel and I talked about, the Luma Days, the Algae Summit, where people come to discuss everything that has to deal with algae, from design to science to history. All the different disciplines can come together and discuss it, but thanks to COVID-19 and everything that we're dealing with, of course it has been postponed. Now I don't know whether or not they're going to do it with webinars or with Zoom at a later date, so keep your eye on that. There will be a day, of course, without coronavirus. I don't know when it's going to be, and someone please SMS me the second it happens. But, of course, even after that, the world is going to still need algae and the new innovative projects that come with it. Because, of course, this too shall pass, and algae is going to be an important part of us dealing with climate change. And in my personal belief, I think we're seeing a lot of these viruses and diseases are happening because of how humans have affected the earth. And if we're going to become more symbiotic with our relationship with earth, algae has to be a major part of that. We have to remember how important algae is. So keep looking to the future. This too shall pass. And I hope that everybody has a good Passover and a good Easter. And if you keep listening, we'll keep Alga talking.